From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Tonight we tell Wisconsin, we tell our country, and we tell people all across the globe that voters really do want leaders who stand up and make the tough decisions.
Wisconsin Republican Governor Scott Walker wins a historic recall election by 7% after outspending his rival 7-1. But the Democrats appear to have won control of the Wisconsin Senate. We'll speak with John Nichols in Madison, author of Uprising, How Wisconsin Renewed the Politics of Protest from Madison to Wall Street. Then Nobel Prize-winning economist Joe Stiglitz.
These titans of the financial industry got mega bonuses while their companies were making mega losses, and while they were, as a result of their actions, our economy and the global economy went in to a real tailspin from which we have still not recovered. Their salaries have recovered, but not the rest of us.
Joe Stiglitz on the price of inequality. The 5 heirs of the Walmart fortune command more wealth than the entire bottom 30% of American society. A look at how today's divided society endangers our future. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has survived a historic recall election more than a year after launching a controversial campaign against the state's public workers. After raking in millions of dollars in outside campaign contributions, Walker beat Milwaukee Mayor Tom Barrett 53 to 46%. High voter turnout was reported across the state. Walker becomes the first governor in the country to survive a recall election. Walker declared victory Tuesday night after Barrett conceded defeat.
Tonight we tell Wisconsin, we tell our country, and we tell people all across the globe that voters really do want leaders who stand up and make the tough decisions.
And what we have seen over the last 16 months is we have seen this democracy come alive. To those of you who fought, who obtained signatures, who stood out in the cold, who did what you thought was right, never, ever stop doing what you think is right.
We'll have more from Wisconsin after headlines. 17 civilians have reportedly been killed in an airstrike by U.S.-led NATO forces in Afghanistan. A local official in Logar province said the bombing killed a tribal elder and 16 family members, including women and children, inside their home. 6 Taliban fighters were also reportedly killed. NATO's denying knowledge of the deaths and says only that 2 civilians were lightly injured. If confirmed, the bombing would mark the deadliest known attack on Afghan civilians by NATO forces in many weeks. In other news from Afghanistan, at least 22 civilians have been killed in a twin suicide bombing near a NATO base in Kandahar. The Obama administration says a U.S. drone strike that killed at least 15 people in Pakistan on Monday claimed the life of al-Qaeda's second-in-command, Abu Yahya AlLibi. On Tuesday, White House Press Secretary Jay Carney called Libby's death a major defeat for al-Qaeda.
This would be a major blow, we believe. Al-Libi's death is a major blow to core al-Qaeda, removing the number 2 leader for the second time in less than a year, and further damaging the group's morale and cohesion, and bringing it closer to its ultimate demise than ever before.
Despite U.S. claims, militant leaders in Pakistan say AlLibi escaped the attack with his bodyguard and driver among those killed. It's unknown if any civilians died in the strike. Senate Republicans have blocked the advance of a bill aimed at narrowing the wage gap between men and women. The Paycheck Fairness Act received 52 votes in favor of proceeding to final consideration, 8 votes short of the 60 required. All Senate Republicans voted against it. Among other projections, the bill would have barred employers from retaliating against workers who disclose their own pay information to colleagues and increase the ability of workers to pursue damages for pay discrimination. On average, women who work full-time in the United States make 77 cents for every dollar men earn for equivalent work. A federal appeals court has declined to hear a challenge to a decision that declared California's ban on same-sex marriage unconstitutional. California outlawed same-sex marriage in 2008 when voters passed the ban known as Prop 8. A three-judge panel struck down the ban in a 2-to-1 decision earlier this year, ruling that Proposition 8, quote, serves no purpose and has no effect other than to lessen the status and human dignity of gays and lesbians in California, unquote. Tuesday's decision to refuse hearing and appeal clears the way for the case to go before the Supreme Court. The Syrian government has reached a deal to allow humanitarian workers into the country while at the same time announcing the expulsion of foreign diplomats. An agreement brokered Tuesday would mark the first authorized entry of international aid groups into Syria aside from the Red Cross. UN official John Ging said the deal marked an important first step.
Today marked a step of progress in that there is now agreement with the Syrian government on the scale, scope and modality for humanitarian response in Syria moving forward. So the discussions have come to a point of conclusion on the need for scaling up and how we will do that. Whether this is a breakthrough or not will be evident in the coming days and weeks, and it will be measured not in rhetoric, not in agreements, but in action on the ground.
The announcement on aid workers came as the regime of Bashar al-Assad announced 17 foreign diplomats are no longer welcome inside Syria. Ambassadors from the United States, Britain, France and Turkey, as well as embassy staffers from a number of other countries, have been ordered to leave immediately. The move came days after the U.S. and 12 other countries expelled Syrian diplomats following the massacre of civilians in Hula. Protests continue to grow across Egypt over the exoneration of top regime officials for killings during the uprising, as well as the involvement of a top regime figure in the ongoing presidential elections. On Tuesday, tens of thousands flooded Cairo's Tahrir Square and other cities in the largest show of outrage to date following the sentencing of ousted Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak and other former regime officials on Saturday. Mubarak and his former Interior Minister, Habib el-Adli, were given life in prison for failing to stop the killing of unarmed demonstrators during the protests that ended Mubarak's nearly 30-year rule. However, the court dismissed corruption charges against Mubarak and his sons, Alaa and Gamal, on technical grounds. The court also acquitted 6 former police chiefs for their roles during the uprising when 840 protesters were killed and more than 6,000 injured. No one was found guilty of actually ordering the killing of protesters. Protesters are also calling for the reinstatement of a measure that banned the involvement of Mubarak's last prime minister, Ahmed Shafiq, in Egypt's presidential elections. Shafiq won nearly a quarter of the votes in last month's elections and is headed for a runoff with Muslim Brotherhood candidate Mohamed Morsi. In other news from Egypt, the ruling military council has given lawmakers a 48-hour deadline to form an assembly to write a new constitution or face having a charter imposed. Palestinians rallied across the occupied territories Tuesday to mark the 45th anniversary of the outbreak of the '67 war, when Israel seized Arab lands, including the West Bank and Gaza. Scuffles erupted near the Israeli military camp of Ofer when Israeli troops fired tear gas to disperse Palestinian demonstrators waving flags and throwing stones. In other news from the occupied territories, the artistic director of the acclaimed theater company for Palestinian children has been seized in an Israeli military raid. Nabil al-Rai of the Jenin Freedom Theater was taken from his home in the early morning hours and taken to an undisclosed Israeli army base. The Jenin Freedom Theater was founded to help Palestinian children express themselves through the arts. The theater's founder, Giuliano Merchamis, was shot to death last year. The head of the International Atomic Energy Agency has publicly accused Iran for the first time of seeking to hide evidence of a 2003 nuclear weapons test. IAEA Director Yukiya Amano says Iran may have tried to clean up the Parchin military complex ahead of a potential visit by international monitors. The U.S. ambassador to the IAEA, Robert Wood, called for immediate inspections.
It was clear from some of the images that were presented to us that further sanitization efforts are ongoing at the site. There were a number of countries in that meeting that asked very serious questions reflecting the concern that the broader international community has about Parchin. And I think, as I mentioned to some of you last time, what we all believe needs to happen is for Iran to open up that Parchin facility to the IAEA and to do it now.
New details have emerged, meanwhile, on the U.S. rejection of a 2005 Iranian offer to resolve the nuclear standoff. The journalist Gareth Porter reports the Bush administration blocked France and Germany from negotiating with Iran over Tehran's willingness to convert enriched uranium to fuel rods. A former top Iranian negotiator says European negotiators told him, quote, they were ready to compromise, but that the United States was the obstacle. American Muslims in New Jersey say they're suing the New York Police Department for its widespread surveillance of Muslim Americans. The Associated Press won a Pulitzer Prize for its series revealing the NYPD has extensively spied on Muslims, targeting mosques, businesses, and student groups throughout the Northeast. The suit is led by the national advocacy group Muslim Advocates. Newly surfaced documents show top executives at Bank of America neglected to tell shareholders about major losses at Merrill Lynch before purchasing the company for $50 billion in 2008. While shareholders relied on projections from the bank that the deal would earn money, the losses actually resulted in a $20 billion taxpayer bailout. Documents filed as part of a shareholder lawsuit in federal court show Bank of America executives knew about the losses before the purchase. The documents include testimony from Bank of America's then-chief executive, Kenneth Lewis, who admitted he had received loss estimates that were not included in documents given to shareholders. Documents show that just days before the vote, both companies determined Merrill's losses for the fourth quarter would be $14 billion before taxes. The bank's former treasurer reportedly warned another executive at the time that failing to disclose the losses could be criminal. And an Occupy Wall Street protester says he's gone on hunger strike and has stopped taking his AIDS medications to protest trespassing charges against activists who were arrested at New York's Trinity Church on December 17th. Jack Boyle, who's 57 years old, has been on hunger strike and without medication for roughly 2 weeks. Protesters have asked the church, one of the city's largest landowners, to, quote, forgive us our trespasses, a reference to the phrase in the Lord's Prayer. The arrests occurred when protesters scaled a fence onto church-owned property near after Trinity refused to give them sanctuary following their eviction from Zuccotti Park. Many of those arrested are due in court next week. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.